Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Cox, and I'm the host of the New America Movement. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I have my co-host, Jordan. Jordan, say hello.
What's going on, everybody? How y'all doing this evening?
This is my son, partner in crime, and we just enjoy tearing up the political trail, talking about all the things that are coming around South Carolina.
That's right.
This is an election year, so we have so many people trying to get in office and so many people trying to hold on to their seats. So it's interesting. But we have a great person here with us today, Kevin Bishop, who is the communication director for Lindsey Graham. How many know who Graham is? So if you do, okay, I'm just being a little humorous here. Kevin, it's so good to have you on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to just start out hitting some questions. What made you decide to run for District 3?
Well, that's a great question. You know, for the past year, I'd been retired. I was in the process of retiring from Lindsey Graham's office. My whole plan was to retire at the end of February and open up my own little company. I'd been with Lindsey for 27 years as his communications director, the only one he had in his entire time in the U.S. Senate. I'd been with him when he was in the U.S. House as well. I'd been through impeachment with him. And, you know, my plan was to retire into February. So I get to January, I think it's January 11th, I started my own little company, Bishop Strategy. I paid my $130 to the Secretary of State. I'm going to retire and start my own little company. I was actually out talking to clients, believe it or not, just say, hey, at the end of February, I'm going into business. I'd love to sign you up. And daggone, 1 week later, Jeff Duncan announced he wasn't running. And so I had some friends and family, and people said, you know, you really ought to take a look at this. You know a lot about these issues. You've been involved in this for a long time. So I just thought about it, prayed about it a lot, and here I am. It wasn't something I ever planned, I'd ever thought about. I'd never had a grand plan. I wanted to run for office, to be honest with you, and here I am. And so God sometimes leads us in a different direction, and here I am. I'm not suggesting God wants me to win, not saying that. You know, God, plenty of stories in the Bible about God like to humble people too. So maybe we'll see which one, but I'm enjoying it. I'm having a great time. It's so fun to go out and talk to people and meet with them. There's just some wonderful people in this district. Absolutely. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm having a good time, and whatever happens, happens. We'll take it from there. So.
Well, I've run for 3 offices, so I know the experience. I've always enjoyed campaigning. I think you meet some great people. You get to talk about a lot of the issues. You learn a lot. You learn where people really are on issues, and some of them you scratch your head on and say, I don't know where you're getting that from, but there are others that are very logical, and you see, well, I would like to, participate in helping to change some of these issues and make America greater. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. So let me ask you this. You're an Easley citizen.
Yep.
You're running for a congressional seat, District 3. For those that don't know, he's going to be, if elected, a congressman in Washington. This is not a state seat. This is a federal seat. And living here, your family's here. How many kids have you got?
Well, let's see. I moved here. My wife and I got married in 1997. We actually were living in Washington at the time. I had graduated from Clemson. I'm a South Carolina native. I was born and raised in the big city of Holly Hill, South Carolina. It's a 2-stoplight town down in the low country. Some of you may know we had a baseball player come out of there. Brett Gardner played for the Yankees. Mike Williams, a great Clemson football player, came from a suburb called Vance, South Carolina. But anyway, I graduated from Clemson in 1993, Clemson family. Moved to Washington after I graduated. Went up there in 1994. I did different jobs, worked for Leadership Institutes, a conservative organization. In 1994, I went to Texas and worked on a congressional campaign for a guy. And we defeated a 42-year Democrat incumbent. He was chairman of the House Judiciary Committee. Moved back to Washington, and that's where I met my wife. She was a Texas gal. She's actually from Fort Worth, Texas. She was working with her congressman in Washington at the time. We got married in 1997. We lived in D.C., and then just had enough of that, getting a little older. In 1999, I said, well, I want to get out of here. I want to have a family. I want to live somewhere, live in my home state. And we moved to Easley in November 1999. We actually moved over Thanksgiving. We were probably the only people to ever move to Easley over Thanksgiving. Everybody else was with their family. We were here moving. We bought a little house up off of Linhart Road. And we've been here ever since. We've had 4 kids. Preston is my oldest. He's 22. He's a senior at Clemson. I can't wait for him to graduate. I'm tired of paying for his tuition. I've got a boy-girl twins, Ella and Will. She's a sophomore at Clemson. My son, Will, is a sophomore. Actually, a third class is what they call him. He is a sophomore is what we would call it at the U.S. Air Force Academy in Colorado. And then I've got a daughter, Margaret, who's a junior at Easley High School. So I've had 3 graduate from Easley. Got 1 more on the way to graduate from Easley, and my wife is a social studies teacher at Getty's Middle School here in Easley. And so this is where our family is. This is where we raised our kids. We've been longtime members of Easley Presbyterian Church, so this is our hometown. This is places and people we love, and we've just been so wonderful to live here. It's been absolutely wonderful for us. So
Well, that's awesome. Let me ask you this question. Running for Congress, that's a very high-pressure job. You've got a lot of skill, a lot of experience in this. No doubt this is not going to be something new to you. But I think something the listeners would like to know, what's your relationship with Lindsey Graham? And the reason I'm asking this, are you and him on the outs?
No.
So talk about that and what's his opinion about you running? Because these are things I'm certainly a lot of people want to know about.
Absolutely. Lindsey, I've worked with Lindsey for 27 years. Lindsey's my friend. He'll always be nothing but my friend. He's always been, he's been a wonderful boss to me. I think that's one thing that people, everybody else gets to see Lindsey as the senator and the congressman, and that's what you see him as. But I also saw him as my boss. And the one thing, Lindsey, I do think that people need to know about him is he is a wonderful boss. Our chief of staff, a guy named Richard Perry, he's been with him for 29 years. Our state director, Van Cato, he's been with him for 29 years. I was with him for 27 and a half. I came in after he had gotten elected to the House. He's a great guy. Absolutely, he is a ball of laughs, just a really, really good fella. And he's helping me in the race, and he'll continue to help me in the race, and he'll be my friend. Now, does it mean we agree on everything? No, of course not. Tell me this, do you agree with everything your boss ever said or did? But that doesn't mean you storm out and you leave and you walk and say, forget you. Ultimately, I look at it this way. The people will have to make a choice of what you want in Congress. And we have some great candidates running. My job isn't to tear them down. I'm sure we'll have disagreements, and I'm happy to point out those disagreements. But I think the one thing that I bring to the table that other people can't, if you really support President Trump and you think we have to get this country back on track, you think Joe Biden is doing great damage and President Trump is going to win, when he steps foot to the podium on January 20th, and he takes the oath of office, the clock immediately begins ticking on his term. He is term limited. And it's weird. It's most presidents who would go into a second term, they sort of go all the way from November and they just roll in. But he's going to be coming back in new. He's going to need people that can help him on day one. I can do that. For some reason or another, I've just been put in this place and this time that I can help him on day one. I can help President Trump on day one in his second term. And I don't think that's something that anybody else can say they can do. And so I'm prepared to help him. I know a lot about the issues. I know exactly what he's trying to do because I was there during the first term. And so I know exactly how to help him and exactly what we need to do to help get this country great. And President Trump has the right plan. He has the right ideas. But what he does need is someone to help execute those plans. And I'm somebody who can do that. And if you look, people who come from my background today, I think that you're seeing more of these people. I don't know if you know Congressman Chip Roy of Texas, but he actually, and people go, wow, Chip Roy knows what he's talking about. Well, you know why? He worked for Senator Cornyn and Senator Cruz. He comes from a background. He had some experience in this. And you look at Governor of Arkansas today, Sarah Sanders. You look at her. She was White House Communications Director. So, yeah. So you're starting to see some people, but because it's great to have all the right views. You got to have that. That's the principle. That's the first building block of being an effective representative. But the second thing you got to know is how do I get things done and exactly what areas that I can push things at and how do I avoid mistakes? Because that's also a big part of the job. When you're a representative or a senator, when they go to Washington, this is the big leagues. People are going to throw fastballs up there. And sometimes they want to get you to say or do dumb things, not because they're going to defeat you, but they're going to use that to defeat somebody else who comes from a more competitive district. This is a 20-point Republican district. Whoever's a Republican nominee, super heavy favorite to win in November. But we have to nominate someone who's going to be a value-added product, who can help President Trump on day one, who can help the Republican team and the conservative cause on day one, and someone who can add to our numbers. We need more conservatives in Washington. It doesn't do any good for me to be elected if President Trump's not elected. No offense, Joe Biden, the border's going to remain a disaster. President Trump has to win, but he needs people who can help him on day one, and I think that's why people will vote for me.
Okay, one of the big things that we keep hearing in the news today, of course, is the border. It's the number one issue in the country today. You're elected, you go to Washington in January. What is the first thing you're going to do?
President Trump is going to issue executive orders. And the first few things he's going to do, he's going to re-implement Remain in Mexico, Title 42 expulsion policy. Those are all things that President Trump, and only President Trump, can do on his own. And he will do all of those. He has to, but he needs people to back him up. And I'll tell you where it's going to get dicey. President Trump has already talked about this, about beginning to deport illegals Joe Biden allowed in. That's where he's going to need people who can eloquently explain how there's been an abuse of the asylum system. You know, there's so many things going wrong at our border today, but when I was just down in Eagle Pass a few weeks ago, I was in Eagle Pass, Texas. This is where Governor Abbott is basically having to do the job Joe Biden refuses to do in protecting the border. And they told us something. We hadn't really made a lot of news yet because it's but it gets into it. You know, Joe Biden has given these people humanitarian parole, which in the eyes of the law, humanitarian parole, this was seen as something you did for maybe a person who needed like a special surgery, or there was some unique circumstances. But Joe Biden is handing it out in such a fashion now that it's crazy that, you know what, it's making it to where the Mexican drug cartels, you know, the cartels who are bringing these people into the country, well, we're not sure we're going to be able to prosecute them for bringing people into the country because it's humanitarian parole. I mean, Joe Biden is saying that he's giving them humanitarian parole and helping them claim asylum. There's just a lot like that going on. It's just insane what's happening at our border today. Humanitarian parole is a massive abuse of our asylum laws. President Trump, I'll be honest with you, he's the one who has to clean up the vast majority of that. And he's the only one who can issue those executive orders to put the country back on the right footing. What he was doing at our border worked. We need to re-implement those. Explaining to the American people why he's doing this, how he's doing this, and how he needs to continue to do this. Because, you know, if you look at it, Jay Johnson was a former Department of Homeland Security under Obama, and he said 1,000 encounters a day would be an absolute disaster. Well, sometimes we're having 10,000 to 12,000 encounters a day. That's where we're at with our border, and it's an absolute disaster. And I've been there 3 times. I've seen it in person.
Other than the fact that it may help some states gain votes to help stay in power, what's in it for them, for the Biden administration, or for the Democrats in general?
You know, that's what I think is a little bit crazy about the whole thing. Is that I will say this: Governor Abbott deserves great credit for taking migrants. You know, he has to offer them basically, do you want to go to New York? He can't just ship them there. He has to say, do you want to go to New York? And they're going. But for too long, this has been a problem that states like Texas or Arizona, they've had to bear the burden of this. But by what Governor Abbott has done, by sending them to Denver, Chicago, New York, places like that, he's made the problem real. Now, what did the Democrats? I don't know. To be weird, the crazy thing about it is now, how many Democrats in the Biden administration are completely washing their hands of this policy? I don't know if you've seen it, but Kamala Harris says, well, she's only handling the triangle country. She's not doing with anybody else. They all realize this is an absolute disaster, but they've pinned them. This is a disaster of their own making. That's 100% a disaster of their own making. And why don't they have the guts to just say, hey, we were wrong? Because it'll cost Joe Biden. The immigration groups are just prepared to rip him apart, and he's searching for every vote he can. And right now, so it's us. It's the American people who are paying the price for his disaster he's created for us. And that's just it's a disaster. And it is if Joe Biden wins re-election, heaven help us. Heaven help us.
Oh, absolutely. So you've been down to the border 3 times. And you've been to Del Rio, Tuscan, all of those places. I heard this, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that out of 100% of the people crossing our border, 80% of those are criminals. Only 20% are really trying to seek asylum. Is that what you saw or heard talking to border agents and stuff like that? Or are they kind of saying the same thing, or are they saying that these people really are coming here searching for asylum?
Well, the border, it depends on where you go. We've been 3 different times. We went to 3 different sectors. Let me just walk you through where we went. The first time we went to what's called Tucson, Arizona, Tucson sector. But actually the border town was Nogales. And at that time, Biden had just been elected president. He had just come in the office. And the crazy thing about that trip, there wasn't a lot of traffic coming back and forth yet. But what he had done, he had stopped construction of the border wall. And the border agents took us to see one of the most amazing things, frankly, one of the dumbest things, amazingly dumb, okay? Dumb things I've ever seen in my life. So the Border Patrol, they take us, it's probably 3 or 4 miles out of Nogales. It's incredibly rough terrain, up and down. I mean, if you've ever been to that part of the country, it's very, very rough terrain around that area. And they take us out there and they bring us to the spot, and then you look to your right, as far as your eye can see is border wall. You look to your left, as far as the eye can see, border wall. Right smack dab in front of you, a big, about 75 to 100-yard hole right in the wall where the fence is laying on the ground. Joe Biden had issued an executive order. They had to stop construction of the fence. So it'd be like nobody in Easley would be this dumb to go build a fence and decide not to buy the last piece of the fence to make the thing correct. But in Joe Biden's America, that's exactly what he did. And to show you how bad it was, the Border Patrol couldn't do there's a big hole right in the fence. Not only that, they had to station a Border Patrol agent sitting in a truck all day there, 24 hours a day, had to sit there so people wouldn't walk in. I mean, so it's just stupid on every which way. The second time we went to Yuma, Arizona, and that's a Yuma sector, and they were already coming in, and what we were seeing then, you're starting to see some asylum claims. You also were seeing a lot of Brazilians had learned how to manipulate the immigration laws, because you could tell, it was different because you could tell people who'd walk through the desert to come to the United States and those who would come in. And we were noticing Brazilians at the time, what they would do is they would fly to Cancun. They had some money. They would fly to Cancun. They'd go to the beach for a couple of days, and then they'd fly up to the border. They would frankly, just haul their luggage across, turn themselves into the Border Patrol. They were released within 3 days. They'd be at Miami Beach by the weekend. You were already seeing that. These weren't really asylum. These were other people coming in. But the one thing that people don't understand, and I think is really important to point out, the cartels, the Mexican cartels, those are sophisticated organizations in how they handle the flow of migrants into the country. They are every bit as sophisticated as any Fortune 500 company in the world in how they handle the flow and where they're going to go. The last one we went to, of course, was Eagle Pass. And getting back to the asylum issue, the migrants have learned you claim asylum. That's just it. You just claim asylum, okay? Because that's a whole different section of law. It gets into the whole thing. And what Biden does, you claim asylum, they can't hold you very long. They don't have time to determine your claim. So they give you a slip and say, hey, show back up in 2028 or 2029. Ain't nobody going to show up. You'd be an idiot to show up. Nobody's going to do that. No. So that's where we're at. The last place we went to Eagle Pass, and we were down there. I was down there with Senator Scott and Lindsey, and we were down there and just saw that. And that was this, wow. I mean, to see the state of Texas having to enforce the border, the Texas National Guard and the Texas Department of Public Safety is the border protection agency in Texas today, because Joe Biden is basically they're trying to stop people from coming in while Joe Biden is trying to extend his hand and say, come on in, just welcome. And so it's a disaster. It's a disaster on every front. And the Border Patrol, let me tell you, they're total heroes, absolute heroes. They are doing everything they can to protect our border, but more importantly, they're also they're humanitarians. They're trying to help people. They understand they have a job to do, and they're doing it in the best manner and the most humanitarian and the most they're really good people, and it really hacks me off when you see people talk bad about them. AOC and the rest of these people who bash the Border Patrol, they have no idea what they're talking about. Those are some of the greatest people, and they really don't get the credit they deserve, but they have the credit and appreciation of me, I can tell you that. So,
yeah, no, there's a lot of stories of Border Patrol agents talking about the border and stuff, and saying how bad it really, really is. And when you hear some of their stories, them walking up on, dead children, women, stuff like that, it really gets to you, because you start really understanding, like you said, with Abbott shipping them off now to these sanctuary cities, the Democrat cities, saying, hey, we love them, but now they're there, and now it's real. Now it's real. And yes. So it's when you hear these stories, you're like, this is real. This isn't just affecting Texas. Isn't just affecting Arizona. It's not just affecting these areas. It's affecting everybody. And it's affecting them. It's affecting us. And so it's at this point, we are 100% in a crisis. That we just, at this point, how do you get a hold of it? How do you get a hold of it?
Again, it's going to take a new president. It takes a new president. Absolutely. There's no, trust me, if you do one thing, elect President Trump. That's the first thing. I don't care who you elect from the 3rd District. None of us can stop it.
Because he's the only one that seems to even be willing to want to stop it.
Absolutely.
He's the only one that I see that is actively campaigning and actually saying, this is what I'm going to do.
Jordan, let me tell you, there's 2 points that the Border Patrol makes, and I'm going to tell you that we don't really get to talk about as much here. But the first point they make is you have to have the right policies in place. Joe Biden's got the wrong policies, okay? Now, the Border Patrol, in their defense, they can't criticize President Biden. They have to do their job. So it falls to people like me, it falls to others to help them tell the American people what exactly the problem is, because they can't do it. Okay,
Right.
that's their job. They have a different job to do. They can't do that. So it falls to people like me to help tell the American people that. But the second thing that you'll listen, if you listen really closely to what's happened, there's two parts to border security when you get down to it. Number one, you got to have the right policies in place. Joe Biden's got all the wrong policies in place. The second part that doesn't get as much attention, but I think this is just as important, is the attitude. And the Border Patrol will talk about that. When Trump was president, he had the right attitude. You know what it was seen? He was a bad guy who did not want you coming. He was a incredibly bad host. Okay,
Right.
Do not come to the United States. Get off my lawn. You know, he's that, and that is a very important, often underreported part of border security, is to have a president who is seen as, frankly, not a welcoming host.
Yeah.
Joe Biden was seen as a incredibly welcoming. Oh, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do all that Trump stuff. That's not us. That's not me. And then so that gave the green light. And then when people started coming and Joe Biden actually allowed them in, well, then you just threw gas on the fire. And that's what we have today. So it's two parts. You got to have the right policy. You got to have the right attitude. And President Trump, to his great credit, he absolutely had the right attitude. Don't come. We don't want you. Not now. Not ever. Nope. Don't. So,
well, let me ask you this question. What can we do in Mexico to make them behave better? Because it's obviously like they're just throwing gas on the fire as well. I mean, it's depopulating their country. And at the same time, they've got to know that it's upsetting a lot of our leadership in Mexico.
And isn't the leadership saying that they're not going to stop the migrants from coming unless we give, so now they're negotiating with
blackball.
Again, but President Trump he took a very tough line with Mexico.
Yeah.
Very tough line with Mexico. And Joe Biden, let's face it, he ain't taking a tough line with any. No. The only people Joe Biden takes a tough line in are people like you and sitting in this room. Right. Okay, he's going to be really hard on everybody.
He calls us terrorists.
But the rest of it, as for that, as far as the Mexican government, Trump was, he had people's respect. And actually the Mexican government, he made them work with us. He was threatening them. You're going to work with us or else. And that's what you're going to have to do. You have to have that type of tough leadership, which he did, to work with it and get the Mexican government to help us out. Joe Biden is more unicorns and, cats and dogs are going to get along and people just don't respect him. And when you have that, it's just a disaster in the making. Now, the Mexican, let's get back, another issue with Mexico, again, will be the cartels. As I'm saying, those are incredibly sophisticated organizations, and they have their tentacles all throughout Mexico in business and finance and many other industries, and probably the government to some extent as well, too. So we've got to worry about that. But with Mexico in particular, you're also talking, not only are we worried about the border, not only worried about asylum issues, but you also have fentanyl. That's been a massive issue that we've been dealing with Mexico. The massive amounts of fentanyl and illegal drugs that come through there.
Are you seeing a bunch of people in the Senate and stuff like that, and Congress or whatever, like seeing a bunch of talk about the fentanyl coming across?
Well, yeah, I think fentanyl is not just, you have the cursors come in from China, then they're making the pills in Mexico. They also made some, we had a situation last year where they made some in York County. I don't know if you ever saw that. They made enough, it only takes, I forgot, it was just a very small ratio, but they made enough in York County, like kill everybody in the state. I mean, it was just crazy.
There's a woman from Spartanburg about the same thing. Yeah.
Now, these were illegals making it?
Well, no, I think these were actually, the drug cartels are involved in making fentanyl, and they also ship it in here, but sometimes the chemicals come in here and they're made as well in the United States. But the Mexican the cartels are very much into fentanyl production. They're into illegal drug production. There's been a lot of discussions of whether or not you declare them foreign terrorist organizations, or what do you do to go after them. That all is tied up in this as well. The cartels, but they're making, it's not their main source of profit nowadays, but they're making a lot off the illegal trade, and they are sophisticated in what they do. I mean, very, very sophisticated. And that's why you had that bill that was in the Senate they had talked about, allowed up to, I think, 5,000 encounters a day before anything kicked in. And the people who really understood this will say, you can't do that, because here's what I'm going to tell you: the Mexican cartels, they'll limit it to 49.95 every day, and they'll never kick in to some of those other things. I mean, they're super sophisticated in what they do. But they're making money.
Well, to run a country, you have to be.
Yeah. So those are really they're billion-dollar enterprises. Now.
Okay, let me ask you this. the situation in the Middle East with Israel and Iran, it's becoming extremely complicated. You're hearing things like Israel being called apartheid. You hear things like Hamas needs more human rights. We are having to figure out where do we stand on Iran. We're releasing, I think the Biden administration released $4 billion to for them to be able to operate their furthering of terrorist agenda across our Western culture. How would you, as a congressman, what's your position on Israel?
I stand with Israel without apology,
Yep.
always. And if Joe Biden would be half as hard on the Mexican drug cartels and Mexican government and people allowing immigrants into the country as he is on the Israeli government, I think we would all be better off. I'm no fan. Hamas is a terrorist organization, must be eradicated. I completely stand with Israel without apology, and I will stand with them. I will be one of Israel's best friends in the United States House of Representatives. I have so much respect for the Israeli people, the Israeli government. I just think it's absolutely horrible what you see Joe Biden and the Democrats who just continue to lambaste Prime Minister Netanyahu. I think that's terrible. Prime Minister Netanyahu, to his great credit, he understands the good and bad in the world, and he knows that evil must be confronted and eradicated. And Hamas is a terrorist organization. They're every bit as bad as Al-Qaeda or ISIS or any of those other guys. They're in the same boat. And I feel sorry for keep in mind there are Palestinians who are frankly under Hamas's thumb, that they don't like Hamas either. But so it's important in this case that the Israelis have the ability to wipe out Hamas, and just that can be done with, and the Palestinian people who want to live at peace with Israel have a chance to flourish.
Yeah, I think it's an atrocity what's happening in our country. And of course, the Bible warns us about turning our back on Israel. And as a Christian, I certainly want to follow Bible guidelines. I'm certainly not an agnostic or an atheist or have thrown the Bible away. To me, it's a part of my life and my culture. And I hate to see our administration take such a slanted view in the defense of Hamas when we know they're terrorist groups and we know what they're going to do to Israel and to us as well. Yes. And the idea of giving Iran some sort of thumbs up that we're going to support them, and it gets so convoluted in the whole idea of how the Biden administration deals with foreign policy. Yep. Now, you're coming in as a very, very experienced leader in Congress if you're elected.
I don't know about that. But.
Well, I mean, you've been 26 years with Lindsey.
Yeah.
You know these issues. Yeah. And I think that's the great point as having you as a new congressman for our state, because I think you're going to go and not having to ask the question, but you're going to be able to give the answer, as opposed to people just trying to figure out where we are with this. So that's a great asset that we have with you being elected. So that's exciting. Now, what would you say about the economy? Because this is another big issue with Americans today. What are we going to do about inflation? When are we going to balance the budget? And when are we going to start paying the debt off? Because we all know, because everybody that has a half a brain in America has a budget. Yep. You can't live in America without a budget. You know what you make. You know what you pay out. If you get outside the lines in it, they're going to come get your car and foreclose on your home. Yep. And we're all waiting on that to happen. It's like, when is this big thing going to take place? And why can't we balance the budget? I would say if you really polled all the American people today, would all be 95%. We got to fix this problem, but we can't and we don't. The Democrats won't do it and Republicans won't do it. What would be your leadership on something like this?
Well, let's go through a couple of things. Let's go through how we got sort of into some of these problems. Number one, Biden passed a thing called the Inflation Reduction Act, which may be one of the most misnamed pieces of legislation in the history of the Congress. It was a bit of a kabuki theater by Senator Schumer to name it the Inflation Reduction Act. It actually added to inflation. So things like that, no, do not support. Sometimes you have to slow down the spending, and I think that's where we're going to be. And that's what we have to do. You've hit on lots of different topics. First, let me say this. The Republican Party is not good when it comes to spending. We are not good. Not good. We are better than the Democrats. They're awful. We're merely terrible. But right now, neither party does a very good job of balancing the budget. That's just not, we went through COVID. We had some situations where we had to, there were certain things that had to be done during COVID. I think they had the first bill that was passed. It was almost near unanimous. But then a lot of that sort of continued on probably too long. And so now we're trying to get things back in order. The biggest thing is we need to continue to grow the economy. That is the way that you increase revenues by growing the economy. There's a couple other things I think we need to do. Number one, I favor a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution. That's what, if you want to know why the state of South Carolina, why we balance our budget, it's because we have a balanced budget amendment. Washington doesn't have one. And until they get one, they'll never have the backbone to make the tough decisions. There's actually, it was talk of a commission on entitlements. Was sort of, you saw this earlier a couple of months ago. There was a entitlement commission, and it was sort of weird. You had an alliance between sort of the right wing, who didn't want the commission to go forward because they were afraid it may entertain tax cuts. You had the left wing because they don't want to deal with entitlements of any type. So that's what we're running to in Washington. You sort of have this, it's paralysis basically on the budget. But I believe in the biggest issue that our next congressman will face when it does come to budget is extension of the Trump tax cuts. They will be expiring. I will vote in favor of those. I will vote to extend the Trump tax cuts because we have to grow revenue. Balancing the budget is only going to take place by a balanced budget amendment. You also have to look at long-term entitlement reform and how you're going to do that. Now, President Trump hadn't been right. I mean, he hadn't been a big fan of that. Let's be clear. He was not. That's not his issue. He doesn't really like to talk about that. But I do think there are some smaller steps I would encourage him, if I were in the Congress, to start looking at. Is there really a reason that Bill Gates needs a Social Security check? Can we at least begin mean testing people of that nature, or Medicare for people of that nature? And then you can start looking at it. I mean, Bill Gates is worth billions and trillions of dollars. He probably is worth almost as much as the U.S. government. Can we at least take a small step on some of these things to begin moving the ball in the right direction? But at the end of the day, when it comes to balancing the budget, a lot of it's going to fall to the president. He's got to give us a plan of how he wants to do it. And when he does that, I'll back him up 100% of the way.
Well, it seems like we have this battle several times throughout the year, trying to figure out how we're going to not let the clock expire, what are we going to put in the bill, but we never seem to get it resolved. Yeah. So is this a sign that we're trying to find a way to balance the budget, or is this just posturing?
Well, a lot of what you see in Washington, I'll be honest with you, I've always favored, it's something, Washington does a budget, I'll go through the entire program. You pass a budget, it's basically a one-sheet piece of paper in Washington. Then you go to the authorizing committees, and they authorize it, and then you go to the appropriators. That's the way it's supposed to work on paper. It doesn't always work like that. In fact, you have 13 appropriations bills every year. We only pass about 5 or 6, and then you get this big omnibus at the end of the year. That's sort of whatever. We can't say that on a family show here, but that's the way the process is supposed to work. I've always thought it was a talk many years ago about going to what we called a biennial budget. You'd do a 2-year budget to where you would do the same thing, but it covers 2 years. So you have 1 year to do the budget and then 1 year to do oversight. That is the one thing that I wish we saw more in the Congress, is oversight over how tax dollars are being spent. That is one thing that we give short shrift, because Congress is always in such a hurry, frankly, to try to pass the budget. And by the time we're always late, it's going to be late. By the time they get to that, it's time to start the next year and get going again. So I think a biennial budget makes a lot of sense. I'm open to any ideas like that. But again, some of these Congress can do, but then some of these, the big ticket items, President Trump's going to have to be a leader on these for us. And whatever he wants to do, I certainly will be more than open to listening to his suggestions, because he's got to lead the party, he's got to lead the country in getting the House in order. I would love to say that a congressman can do it. If President Trump won't sign it into law, you're sort of banging your head against the wall. So,
one of the strange things that has sort of confused a lot of people in our country is how our universities have become so woke. They're anti-Israel.
Yes.
They're anti-family.
Yep.
They're very much about supporting anything woke agenda has. It's almost like anything that opposes that, they're going to come after you. And now we've seen them, they're fighting against Israel, they're pro-Palestinian, and these people really don't know what they're talking about. Because, I've door knocked in campaigns, and I had some college kids. Unfortunately, they were from Clemson trying to tell me Israel was apartheid. What? And I said, how did you come up with that? Yeah. And they said, well, our professor told us this. And I'm like, no, Israel's not apartheid. You got that confused. Are there anything but apartheid? They're trying to figure a way to move forward together. It's the Palestinians that are making the war against Israel. And I said, that's just a very, very clear fact. But our universities are getting very, very sidelined on, it's almost like they're indoctrination camps. Yes. As a congressman, what would you do to help curve that? Because something's got to be done there.
Well, there's different things we can do as a congressman. The first one, that when you're talking about universities and federal funding, I think the first thing is we need to really take a look at anti-Semitism on campus. There's a couple of things. Number one, anti-Semitism is one. We're seeing too much, frankly, anti-Semitic speech at public universities. Now, public universities do receive federal funding. They all get some. So we need to make sure.
Well, they get some from these Arab countries as well, and that's a strange thing. I think it was like $4 billion.
But let me tell you one of the biggest issues I have with colleges today, and I will say this: Clemson and our university in South Carolina are not near at the level of some of these other schools. Whatever problem we have is relatively minor because our state is not going to put up with that level of ridiculousness. But when you're talking about federal funding to universities, one thing that we should demand that they do is promote free speech. We have too many colleges in the United States, public universities, who will not. They take a person like a Ben Shapiro, or really any conservative speaker, Tucker Carlson, Ben Shapiro, Ann Coulter, you name it, and they refuse to allow them to come and speak at the university because it is too upsetting to the students. That is utterly ridiculous. Free speech is under assault on university campuses all the time. College kids, what they say has to be censored. It is, if you speak your mind, you can be expelled, you can be ostracized. I mean, that is not the way universities are supposed to operate. Universities should promote free speech. But I was trying to think, Riley Gaines, she went and spoke, I think, as USC Davis, University of California, Davis. She has to hide in the bathroom or like hide in a room because the students are going so crazy. And you're like, wait. She's a swimmer at the University of Kentucky who believes that men should not be competing in women's sports. And that is so upsetting to the students that they... Are you kidding me?
And what's even more crazy is the fact that you actually have people in this world that don't even know what a woman is. Can you believe that? I mean, don't even know what a woman is. Now, let me explain something to the American people. If you got to be a biologist to know what a woman is, I got some news for you. You're going to live a long, hard life. You're going to be in some situations you ain't going to want to be in. Like, the fact that we have to have these conversations is a very sad thing. The woke crap that's all around here. I mean, like you said, South Carolina, we have a little bit of it. We fight against it every time we see it, which is what I love. But these other states, they don't. When they see it, you'll see some parents get up there and they silence those parents. And then, like California, for instance, they don't care about that. I mean, they're going to let them do whatever they want to do. And it is the point I'm making is, at what point do we protect the women? The actual women. Yeah. So, like Don Stanley, the head coach of South Carolina, actually just said after the Final Four against NC State, I believe they played, she said that she would be all right with transgenders coming and playing in basketball and in the NCAA. Now, I don't know if y'all know this, but she has a girl that is 6'7" on her team. Now, she can't dunk at 6'7", but if you take a college player and put him in a wig and in a girl's uniform and take him out there, he's going to average 50 a game. He's just going to. He's too fast. See, what these people don't understand is girls' sports and men's sports, they're two different. They're two different sports. Absolutely. Even though they're the same sport, they're played different. See, women run more of what we call fundamental offense, fundamentals in basketball. And in others, it's more fundamental. So it's no real athleticism, no real skill. That's why you don't see girls jumping from the free throw line with their hands cocked back, dunking it and stuff. And it's because they physically can't do that, so they have to be taught the fundamentals correctly. That's why you see when you see them play, they play like this. It's not a hate on them. This is just the facts. They kind of play like a well-organized AAU team, a 14-year-old, 16-year-old, 18-year-old AAU team. And it's because of the way they have to play. It's a much slower game and everything. So if you bring a man in, he is going to grab that ball and outrun every single one of them girls, and it'll be just a layup line for him. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because Riley Gaines, she gets up there, she talks about stuff like this. At what point do we say, we used to say believe all women. The left used to say believe all women. The liberals used to say, believe the women because they're telling you the truth. But don't believe them when they say they feel uncomfortable in the bathroom. Don't believe them when they got a little girl in there, a little kid in there, and they're a parent, and they say, hold on now, we feel a little uncomfortable. Don't believe them then. Don't believe Riley Gaines when she gets assaulted in the bathroom, has to lock her. Don't believe her then.
Yeah. I feel incredible. I feel terribly bad for Riley Gaines. I'm be honest with you. She is speaking what people in this part of the country would be common sense.
What happened?
And they're making her sound like she's the crazy one.
And what happened to her was the fact that they told her that they were giving the trophy to Leah Thomas, the man. All because she had to pull it out. She's like, why? And finally the guy said, well, it's the optics. Yeah. We need the picture of it. We need him holding the picture of it so we can push the narrative.
She deserves this great credit for not backing down and continuing to speak the truth and doing what has to be done. And, in South Carolina, that's why I said, we live in a great place. We're not going to have that level of ridiculousness here. Now, Dawn Staley, what she said.
Right.
I don't think any of us agree with that.
No, yeah.
If she were to run for office, she would find that she's not even going to come close with that type of attitude.
No.
But we aren't that. But Riley Gaines, I mean, you look at the number of people you go in there who consider Riley Gaines a villain, and Leah Thomas is the hero. That shows that our country has its priorities way out of whack. And
Planet Fitness just did it too.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I mean, it's not just in sports. It's in your gyms. It's in
the only thing about Planet Fitness, they'll take it into pocketbook, and they're going.
They will.
They're taking a shot there.
They
are. So hopefully that'll make them think a little bit more about some of this. Gets back to like the Bud Light stuff and some of the rest of that.
Absolutely.
So, sometimes they got to get popped in the chops one time. That'll teach them a lesson.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm going to quit going to Planet Fitness. That's going to really mess their bottom line up right there.
I can tell you've been going.
Get that out on the radio. That'll really scare them. But okay. Well, Kevin, it's been great having you on the show. I can sense that you're a very intelligent individual who understands these issues very well. I think we're at a place in our country where if we don't step up to the plate very quickly, it's going to be too late for America to turn some of this stuff around. Things that we're talking about are on the minds and hearts of almost every citizen in this country. Even in the South, we're just praying for the good Lord to give us the kind of leadership that can go to Washington with a pair of boxing gloves that can work with everybody, but at the same time can get the job done. It's not just about knowing the facts, but it's about building the teams that can move the ball forward, support the president, and let's see some good things happen for this country. Because I tell you, the world in America is very different than it was when Trump stepped out of office. And Biden kept his word. He said, I'm very different. And we've seen that. Biden said, hey, I'm going to flip these policies. And he did. And look at our economy, look at our social status, look at our reputation around the world. We are in a very, very critical situation where we better get some good leaders in Washington. So I want to say the best of luck to you. Let us know what we can do to support you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm offering the voters in this district, honestly, maybe a little different choice. I'm prepared to help President Trump on day one. And this is not something that I ever thought I'd be doing. I mean, it just sometimes God has a different plan for us. But I do think I can help him on day one, unlike anybody else in this race. I truly believe that. And I'm offering myself up, and people will make the decision of whether they want me. And I'm perfectly comfortable with whatever they decide. If they decide I'm a person who can go to Washington, represent them and their views, I'll do it with honor. I'll do it with distinction. I'll do it with the way that I think reflects these values and the values of this county and this town that I'm from. And, it's God, family, country. I think that so much signifies what Pickens County, what Easley, and what the people of the 3rd District are. When you get down to it, God, family, country, that basically hits who we are and what we believe, and that's the values I'll take. And just from a little bit of a note here, Pickens County, I went back. I'm a student of history. As a South Carolinian who's lived here, I was born and raised in South Carolina. My family's all from South Carolina. So when I started running, the first thing you always do is you're like, now who was the last guy that got elected, sort of from where you're from, to figure out, okay, now how did he do it? Because believe it or not, there's a little bit of truth regardless. And when I started looking back, there's nobody. 1868, Pickens County was formed, and we haven't had a resident of Pickens County ever elected to the U.S. Congress in 156 years. There was one guy elected beforehand, 73 years before Pickens became a county. His name was General Andrew Pickens, and he was elected to the third Congress. I think it was 1795, possibly. And what was interesting when you read it, George Washington was in his 5th and 6th year as president. So it's been a long time since somebody from this little area. In fact, in Pickens County, we've never done it before. So I'm going to offer myself, and I just think this county, we're the #1 conservative county in South Carolina. You know, we provide the highest percentage of votes of any county in South Carolina to the Republican Party, to the conservative cause. It's my home. I'll take the Pickens County, the Easley, our values of this part of South Carolina to Washington, and I'll represent this district with honor, respect. My door will be open. People won't always agree with me. Nobody's ever going to. My wife doesn't always agree with me. I'm sure most people don't agree with your wife all the time. But I'll always be a person who tries to carry myself and represent. It's not really about me. It's about you, and it's about us. And I'm very conservative personally. I'll be a solid conservative vote. The one thing I will tell you is I don't have any interest in getting the job. If you're one of these people, and we see this sometimes in the Republican Party today, I'm not going up there to form circular firing squads. Okay? No. I need allies to help me save this country. We have to get the country back on the right track. And the way we do it is by electing more like-minded people. It's not by getting rid of the ones who are currently there. And while Marjorie Greene, I respect her views, I think, many of them I agree with. If I were to give her one piece of political advice from all my years of this, instead of getting rid of Speaker Johnson, why don't you pick 3 or 5 Democrats that we can beat and go help their opponents? The best way you can strengthen our country is not by getting rid of Speaker Johnson, it's by giving him a bigger majority. We have to have more people. We simply can't do it. I mean, we have a 2-seat majority today. We're on the road to Speaker Hakeem Jeffries. Forming circular firing squads, all it's going to do is weaken us. The Democrats love it. The liberals love it. They love
because we hurt ourselves.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Hey, look, listen here. You know the way Democrats operate in this business? You know what they do? Let's get you elected, and then we'll figure out what we agree on, okay? And then we'll figure out what we can work on. Republicans look at it and go, wow, you got 100 things. I only agree with you on 97 of these. I don't know.
We say that so much, man.
I don't know. The Democrats is totally let's get you elected, and then we'll figure out what we can work on. And you wonder why they're effective? Because, man, they'll take anybody on their team. They'll find something they can work with that person on.
Absolutely.
And that's why they're good. Republicans, we go around, and no offense, I mean, if you look today, every Republican's a rhino. That term is thrown around. Rhino, Trey Gowdy, rhino. Ted Cruz, rhino. I mean, let's
everybody's a rhino. It always comes from somebody that, if you really dig deep, there's a personal vendetta or something. You know what I mean? So it's and like you said, everybody can't be a rhino, because if that's the case, then we're all in a zoo, I guess. Well, I don't know.
President Reagan said it best: a person who agrees with me 80% of the time is not a 20% enemy. Okay, so we need more people, and every person we can get on our team, I can assure you, there's almost universal agreement among Republicans in the country today to help secure the border. So if we don't agree on something way over here, let's at least get them where they can help us with the border. I mean, we have to build our team, and going around and forming circular firing squads, Speaker Hakeem Jeffries will thank you. He will thank you.
Well, we're going to close with this. One of the things I know in the business world is you can't run a business like we run the country. If you adopted those ideas and policies in any Fortune 500 company, you'd be out of business in a year. So it's interesting how backwards we are on things that are so fundamental. But you're right. You scratch your head and say, what's all this about? Jordan, close for us.
Guys, thank you so much for tuning in to New American Movement. And thank you, Kevin Bishop, for joining us. This has been a great show. Please comment, like, share, and follow New American Movement. You can check us out on Big Patriot Radio at 7 p.m. on Mondays. And if you miss it, it's okay, because we got an encore at 9 o'clock. So that's Mondays at 7 p.m. on Big Patriot Radio. And if you miss it, it is all okay, because we're coming right back at you at 9 o'clock on Mondays on Big Patriot Radio. Thank you so much. God bless, and God bless America. We're sure going to need it.
Thank you, folks. New American Movement. Tune in next week. God bless you, and have a great day.